and welcome to the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. Thanks for tuning in and taking control of your financial future. This is a show where we not only motivate and inspire, we give you actionable, real-world experience to help you live life by design. You'll hear journeys and stories from other physicians, investors, coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Brett Riggins. Hey, everybody. Here we go again. First of all, I want to thank you for listening today. This morning I was working with the team for the launch of season 2, and it's exciting to see the growth of the podcast, growth of the team, and growth in the listener base as well. And first of all, and first and foremost, thank you guys for giving us a listen. Today is no exception. We're going to keep the show rocking here. Today, we're speaking with an author, a financial advisor, and a land flipper, but most importantly, a lifelong learner. I love that. I've been accused of being a seeker myself. He's also the host of the Freedom Formula for Physicians podcast. It's a podcast focused on financial freedom and living a liberated lifestyle. And I can assure you that today's guest lives that liberated lifestyle. And that's kind of how we crossed paths. I was enjoying the pictures that he shared of traveling with his family and still having this, this life that gives him the opportunity to do that. And if that's not liberated lifestyle, I don't know what is. Everybody, please welcome David Denniston, CFA. Welcome to the show, sir.
Fred, that makes me sound so much more. I'm just a regular guy,
Man, come on. No, I love it. I love kind of like tying in the history of kind of like our paths, and then the passion that comes out of my voice is just that because of the things that you've done and what you're doing now, it allows us to share, right? We're all in this together.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I firmly believe, being a lifelong learner, as you said, at least I try and be. I don't know everything, but I'm happy to share with what I've learned and continue to learn along the way. So I'm here to help, man. Let's do it.
Awesome. So the one thing that I do love sharing, and I don't know if I've done this on every single show, but I give them, the listeners, the Lowe's analogy, asking somebody something in Lowe's about either a process or a product. And from that experience way back in my time, and what you were just saying about sharing information, like I'd much rather to work with people and around people who, if you don't know, just be transparent, right?
Yeah.
Say, I don't know that particularly, but yeah. So sharing what we know and sharing what we don't know can sometimes be just as important or even more important.
Absolutely. No, totally. I think in my life, I really strive to get coaches around me from time to time, to be around other people that are doing amazing things. And it's not that I am always learning new things all the time, but I pick up another piece here, pick up another piece there. And so I hope in this conversation today that can be true for those of us that are listening. Hopefully I give you a new thing or two you haven't thought about, or put a new wrinkle in your brain, as a friend of mine likes to say. So let's just be open and learn, and awesome. Hopefully gain some from my experiences.
So first of all, my son, his name is Henry, and he goes by Hank, and everybody's always confused because they call him Hank. But when I speak to him, I say Henry.
Yeah.
You are David, and you also have Dave too. So which one do you prefer?
My parents and my wife call me by David. Everyone else is Dave. So, if I'm in trouble, David it is. But, Dave is fine.
Very cool. Awesome. So that aligns with our scenario too. It's kind of like a more formal, the family is more formal than the cordial of friends. So Dave, on your path, just what I like to do is just give the listeners an idea of where you got started. It's not in medicine, right? It's in financial advising. And I even read it was maybe even going to be a firefighter at some point, right? So there's these things happening for you. Just give the listeners just a brief summary of where you started and a summary of how you've ended up where you're at today.
Yeah, you bet. So I grew up in Southern California. So I'm a Californian at heart, but now I'm all the way in Minnesota. And so as I grew up, I was involved in some sports. I was never the best athlete, but I always worked really, really, really hard. I was captain of the track team, even though I was nowhere close to the fastest guy. And I got injured a lot. And I was actually really interested in orthopedics and orthopedic surgery. But then I was in all these AP and IB classes in high school, and physics, I loved chemistry. I loved biology, but physics just did me in. And I got like a C+ in AP physics one quarter and a B+ another semester. And so as I applied to colleges for my undergrad, I always had a heart for medicine and loved medicine, but it wasn't meant to be as I applied to colleges, and through a bunch of circumstances, I didn't get into the 4 undergrad programs I really wanted to go to, even though I had a 4.3 GPA, because I applied, I think, as undergraduate for pre-med. And so at the last minute, in April of my senior year, I was scrambling because I didn't get into Cornell, I didn't get into Northwestern, I didn't get to UCLA and Berkeley, and wanted to refer me to University of California, Riverside. And so I ended up applying to my dad and my grandmother's alma mater, Seattle Pacific University, and ended up going there for my undergrad. And then I decided, okay, pre-med obviously wasn't it. And so I decided to try out business. Hey, let's see what happens here. If I don't like it, I'll do something else. I was really heavily influenced by my family were mostly blue collar workers. There was no white collar people. Really, my dad was a chemist, so I guess he would count, but like my grandfather was a postman, my grandmother was a teacher. And so that was that kind of mentality we came from. There wasn't a lot of money in our family, but we did have a great aunt and uncle that saved up and up and up, and they were millionaires. So they were always this shining example of someone that did really well for themselves. Compared to my grandmother, that was not. And so I end up in college just developing a love for finance. And as I went along, I'm an introvert naturally. So if you ever saw me at church or someplace else, I'll be kind of shy about it unless I know you well. And doing something like this podcasting is just awesome, by the way, for us introverts, because we can have quality conversations and not feel boxed in by bunch of people out there. So anywho, my skill set became more analytics. So I loved understanding mutual funds and how they worked, and exchange traded funds and how they worked. And so I definitely had a numbers bent to me. And as I looked out there, I ended up deciding to become a financial planner with my goal of, I'm going to educate people on all this awesome stuff. And then you get out there in the real world and you find out it's actually a sales job. And I did work so hard. I tried to contact a bunch of different people. I was fresh out of college, basically running my own business. And I got burned out of doing that. Because being an introvert, man, there is nothing harder. When you're a 22-year-old kid and you're trying to get people to trust you with your lifetime savings. I had the knowledge to do it, but I didn't have the trust. And so I went through this journey of I failed, for someone that's a high achiever. And this has happened many times in my life, right? I didn't make it to the undergraduate programs I thought. And so I had to restart. Well, I'm not making it in this career, so I had to restart. And so my father-in-law was a firefighter. And so I became a volunteer firefighter. I started working for another guy that was a financial advisor, just thinking, what am I going to do with my life? So I went through this whole firefighter academy and quickly found out that my physical abilities, even though I was an athlete, just wasn't nearly as good as some of these people that were going through it and maybe even a little younger than me at that time. And I ended up growing with the financial planning practice I was in the Seattle, Washington area, and grew in responsibility. And so that was going really well. Started getting my CFA credentialing. Chartered Financial Analyst is what that stands for.
Chartered Financial Analyst, not Certified Financial Analyst.
Correct. Chartered. Yeah. So technically I'm a CFA charter holder is the official.
Interesting.
So the reason I chose that designation was because I was really interested in understanding balance sheets and how to select investments and because I was thinking maybe I would eventually get out of financial planning and into an investment bank or helping to run a mutual fund or, doing those sorts of things. And then maybe I would stay in financial planning. I didn't know, but I knew that people who had that charter holder, it's actually generally viewed higher than an MBA in terms of, unless it's from Harvard. If you have a Harvard MBA, that's viewed prestigiously.
Mm-hmm.
But most MBAs, like University of Minnesota, if someone came to me with that right now, I'd be like, I'm not impressed by your MBA. Mm-hmm. But if someone tells me they're a CFA charter holder, the work and effort that goes into that process is so rigorous. And as a matter of fact, out of people who take the level 1 exam, only about 1/3 of people pass level 1. And then only about 40% of people pass level 2 that pass level 1. And then 50% of people that passed all of those levels passes level 3, the final level. So it's this whole multi-year program that I'm working while going through that. And frankly, it's a lot cheaper than an MBA. You're going to pay like $90,000 or more for an MBA. That probably cost me $5,000 for being a CFA charter holder, but it ain't easy.
Right.
And so now it's 2007. All right. So I graduated in 2003, went through that whole thing. It's now 2007. And my boss was just kind of checked out. I was running the show. I had received inheritance from my great aunt that I had mentioned earlier. So at this point, I had no student debt. We had bought a house and had no mortgage. And we now we're in this position where I was like, I'm not happy with where I'm at. I want to do something to change that. So I offered my boss at the time, hey, let me buy into partnership with you. I want to secure my long-term future. I do like it here, but you're making money off of me. I was generating revenue from my clients that was offsetting my salary. Plus he got all this admin stuff from me. Like I was the equivalent of like a $200,000 employee. Mm-hmm. And that's how I wanted to be paid. And so when he said, no, absolutely not, I ended up looking to buy other practices. So I ended up closing on one on August 1st, 2008. That brought me from Seattle to Minnesota, where I am now, where we knew nobody. And so once again, in my life, we kind of start all over. And as you can imagine, the timing sucked with doing that purchase, because only a month later, Lehman Brothers and Washington Mutual and AIG, we're all going through that horrible, atrocious time. And it was a lot of tumult with that. And we got through it. And I'll just fast forward a few years later. So I ended up taking a bunch of family loans in order to make the acquisition work, because even with the inheritance I received, it wasn't enough. Right. Now we bought a house. Now I have a mortgage again, even though I had no mortgage before. I have family loans I'm paying off. And as a financial advisor, I'm doing well. I own my time. I own my practice. All of that's going well, despite climbing out of this hole that I dug myself into. And I were able to save every month. All of that's going well, but I wasn't making the financial progress that I liked. And so I started to explore other streams of income. Now, during this time, my wife and I had our second daughter. Those of you that might have heard my story, she was super duper duper premature. And she was born less than a pound. She was 23 weeks gestationally when she came into the world. So she was our little miracle. My wife had toxemia, preeclampsia. For the second time, we had it with our oldest daughter several years earlier. But this time was really bad. It probably onset within the first 6 weeks of pregnancy, but it couldn't be clinically diagnosed until week 22, basically. So she was having seizures. I mean, it was just horrible postpartum stuff, but the little girl made it. We were in the NICU for a bunch of weeks later. And that's when I decided I wanted to focus on doctors as a niche within my financial planning business, which a lot of it was, let me just give back, because we went through this horrible horrible experience that I wouldn't wish on everyone, an amazing, miraculous experience. And so that's why I started my podcast like 9 years ago with the Freedom Formula for Physicians. And that podcast has been a blessing for me and hopefully a blessing for others as it's grown and evolved over the years. It's allowed me to get into stuff like land investing as I got out of that 2008 crisis. And I was looking, how can I create other streams of income to do what I'm doing? So I ended up buying a mobile gaming kit business with a relative, got into land flipping, tried Amazon FBA businesses, and really just hustled and grinded and worked my butt off and sacrificed some family time to get to where I'm at now, where, we're doing extremely well. We have 420 plus land notes that pay us monthly on top of my financial planning business. It's a multi-million-dollar business for me. And then my little financial planning business, is the engine that chugs and pays the bills and allows us to save some every month. But it's really put us in a position now where we can travel. I don't have to be at the office. I put a team in place to help me manage my businesses. I still meet with clients. I still do financial planning. I'm never planning on leaving that, but I've done that part-time, developing this other multi-million-dollar business on top of my financial planning practice. So now for me today, I have a huge passion around financial planning. I have a huge passion around real estate and creating multiple streams of income. And I really feel I have a unique perspective for people that are interested in following both traditional financial planning and how do you go about this process of setting yourself up for true wealth beyond what I call the Uncle Scrooge method of traditional financial planning, of building up your piles of cash and then taking a percentage off of it in retirement. So.
Wow, there's a lot there to unpack, Dave. So I'm going to circle back on some of this stuff. The first thing that I noticed and what I loved you mentioning is I heard a couple of reasons that got you interested in working with physicians. And one, it was you wanted to be a physician, which is interesting. The orthos have a tendency to be sports related. And as you fell right in that line as well, too. So having that draw and then your experience with your family is a great way. And that, I echo that so much. And when I first started, driving down that why path with physicians, because I'm not a physician either, but that why path on, some of the greatest moments of my life and some of the worst moments of my life, physicians have been there for me and my family so that we can do what we want to do, right? So that we can breathe, so that we can carry on and have children. And that's just such a remarkable thing. So I just love hearing that, first of all. The second piece that caught me, Dave, was you went to become a financial advisor, and you I guess one of the first things you notice is that it's a sales job. What did you mean by that?
So this might offend some people, but I'm going to tell you
Lay it on them. Lay it on them.
I'm going to tell you the truth. Traditionally, financial advisors, when I started in this industry over 20 plus years ago now, it was really about selling mutual funds. It was about selling annuities where there's benefit for the client, right? But many advisors back in the day, and still many today, are in it for a commission. And at the end of the day, as an advisor, you have bills to pay, right? And so someone that's just starting out, especially, they got to feed themselves. So are you going to pick something for someone that's going to pay you a 5 or 6% commission? Or are you going to pick something that's going to pay you 1% or $1,000 a year, right? That you have to earn over time, and you have to get a whole bunch of those. If you have 2 clients, that's $2,000 a year ain't going to pay the bills. Right. So part of the problem that has been with the financial services industry is that many of us small business owners, as you look at this next generation, to actually get people on salary and giving advice that doesn't benefit them is a huge hurdle that the industry has talked about for a long time. So how can you get that personal service, spend the time with clients, while at the same time generating enough revenue for yourself and your family? And that's why, for me, I acquired clients. I didn't want to, knowing that I'm not some great sales guy, I would rather buy the relationship, because I know once I have people, they're with me for a long time, because I'll take great care of them, because I'm not trying to sell them crap. Mm-hmm. So that's how I approached it. And that's something everyone should be aware of as they talk to new people in the industry. That's just a sad reality of how a lot of this worked traditionally, and to a degree still works today.
It's very interesting that you say that. Thank you so much for expressing that too. And what I love about having these opportunities to speak with everybody on the show is to talk about the things that are talked about, but just set aside and not really talked about, right? So this is one of those things. And by saying that, just noticing, sharing your experience, like coming out as a sales position, basically selling commissioned products, and realizing that I come from the world of sales too. So understanding that it's eat and kill, it's kill and eat. Like, you have to go out there and then once you do it, you got to go get it again. You got to get it again. You got to get it again. So this idea of how do we fix this, or where are the opportunities, going to a salary base is an interesting scenario, in that part, and just really building those relationships with client, right? Vendor client kind of scenarios where you're building that relationship. And the thing that jumps into my mind, Dave, is assets under management. This idea of just that, when we lock into a commission agreement, and then even in worst case, now I am not, I'm certified or chartered, or I'm not an attorney, or I'm not an accountant. When I see scenarios where the asset manager makes money no matter what the stock itself or the asset class is doing itself, like there's some sort of flatline fee, I mean, that's almost worse than commission, right? Then it doesn't matter. And then all I have to do is kill once.
Well, yes and no, right, Brett? Because, in the commission model, all you have to do is kill once. That's not true in assets under management. And that's certainly not true in a flat fee or hourly fee scenario. So assets under management, you have to earn the client's business every month. They could choose to leave any day. At least my experiences in the industry, you're not tied to a person for years. If you decide after 2 months they suck, you can drop it and move on. I would say that assets under management is great in the right scenario. All right. So where it goes wrong, where it hurts us as advisors, like let's say someone has $50,000 and they're just starting out with me, right? And let's say they're going to pay me 1.5% assets under management. Well, that's $750 a year, approximately. It'll go up and down depending on what happens with the investments and how that's going, versus someone else that I end up doing the same amount of work for. And let's say they pay me 1% on $300,000. They're paying me more than the $750 person. So for like a young physician starting out, assets under management is actually like awesome, because you're getting the same amount of work, honestly, as someone else that's paying a lot more than you. This is just reality. Where assets under management sucks and where it falls short is when someone has a lot of money saved up and the advisor hasn't lowered their assets under management. Interesting. So let's use that same scenario. You have someone paying you has $50,000. They're paying you 1.5%. That's $750, right? You have someone at $300,000 that's paying you 1% a year. That's $3,000. Let's say you have someone at $1 million paying you 0.75%. That's $7,500, right? So the $1 million person, even though the AUM fee is lower, is paying a multiple of 10 times what the $50,000 person is doing. Now, what's the solution? My solution in AUM is that the fee needs to be lowered aggressively as you get to higher and higher tiers. So someone at $1 million should probably only be paying like 0.4%, or something like that. Not 0.75%. Definitely not 1% of $10,000 a year. Someone at $2 million should even be paying a smaller fraction of that. So that way the fee stays relatively close to the same. Someone at $50,000, I shouldn't be doing assets under management for, because if I'm trying to make $3,000 to $4,000 per client, they're like way underpaying, and I'm giving them the same amount of effort and attention as the $3,000 person. So AUM, if applied correctly, is fantastic. And the reason why is because you are incentivized as the advisor to have things go right for the client. You're also incentivized to gather as much assets as possible. But if you're earning about the same amount of money, then it doesn't matter. You're there for holistic advice. Now, alternatively, there's hourly or flat fee. Now, what a lot of people may not know is behind the scenes, there's a lot of regulatory pressure on flat fee. Reason being, you charge a client something in advance that you haven't actually earned yet. So I formed my own RIA when I split off from my prior partnership 2 years ago. And my compliance lawyer told me don't do flat fee for that very reason. And I was doing flat fee before. I liked flat fee. But the regulators, the SEC and everyone else is coming under pressure to do it. It's the dumbest thing in the world, but whatever. So instead, I will charge people sometimes hourly for work. If I'm not managing the assets, they just want me to look over their shoulder, give them advice. They're managing the money. They're doing their own thing. Then we'll just charge hourly for it. No problem. So I think that's a great solution for somebody that is proactive. They have a good handle on what they're doing. They're just looking for some coaching. So I think those two models both can work. AUM being for someone that wants things done for them, hourly being someone that wants things done with them.
That's a great summary. So done for you under the AUM model and done with you under the hourly model. And this idea of just being able to build relationships with someone like you, Dave, that has that conversation or sets that. I hope we're planting a seed in the listener's head who maybe not be experienced in this path of there are options out there. And this AUM model, like you're saying, if 50K is the deployable capital or the assets in hand, it may not be the best model for you. But building those relationships that allow you to have these types of conversations and say, hey, watch out. When you set on a path of assets under management agreement, right? Then watch as that fee structure. As your assets increase, watch your fee structure. And I've seen a lot of this personally on like self-directed Roths or self-directed IRAs, those kind of things, because we're setting into this for the long term, right, Dave? And as I start compiling these assets and building that bigger number, then that should fall. That what you call AUFM, AUMF, is assets under management fee, should fall or decrease as the volume of the asset increases.
Especially when you're getting over 500K. This is my opinion, because reality is, me as an advisor, the amount of time I spend with a $1 million client is probably the same as a $300,000 client, the same as a $50,000 client. So it's the same amount of time. You just have to even out the fee to make it equitable, no matter which solution you choose.
Very interesting. And similar to, put it back in the real estate terms, when I'm building a portfolio of doors, I don't expect to pay the same percentage of my income if I have 10 doors versus 100 doors, right? Or 10 doors, even versus 20 doors. There's going to be a decrease in that management fee that the property management company will be providing. This leads well right into the next thing here, which is very interesting for a financial advisor to be investing in real estate.
Yeah.
So most of the times, my experience has been, if I'm looking, especially in the self-directed world, that's kind of like mind blowing, inside of the box, kind of that you can't do that. Why would you ever do that? And so when we step outside this box now, and here you are, Dave, talking about investing in real estate, and in a way that is kind of different is land flipping or holding notes on land. Tell us a little bit about your experience with that and how you got into it.
Yeah. So I mentioned my podcast, The Freedom Formula for Physicians. So over eight years ago, maybe 7.5 years ago now, it's July of 2023 when I record this. I had a gentleman on my podcast, which you and I, as we're connecting today, what a wonderful way to get to know somebody and spend some time on this subject. A guy came on and talked about land flipping. Mark Podolsky is the guy's name. I've had a bunch of other people on talk about apartments and syndications and self-storage and all these other business models, which I got exposure to, which was awesome. But a lot of them just was like, I've looked at these before. The numbers don't make sense to me, being the analytical that I am. And when I looked at land, Mark, the way that he sold it was you can make 300 to 1,000% rates of return. And being the skeptic that I am, I was like, yeah, right. What kind of sales dribble is this guy feeding me? And yes, he was feeding me some sales dribble, but there was truth in it. And the truth being that remotely, anywhere in the world, I can flip paper. That's all it is. I'm getting someone to sell me their property for 25 or 30 or 40 cents on the dollar. And I'm turning around and selling it for 80 or 90 or 100 or maybe even 120 or 130 cents on the dollar relative to what I put into it by selling it for cash or owner financing, me as the owner being the bank. And so conceptually, I was like, man, if I could get a 100% rate of return, forget 300 to 1,000. If I could get a 100% rate of return, that would be far better, than usually what I can get in the stock market. Certainly some stocks, say look at Tesla or Amazon or Microsoft or some of these tech stocks have done amazingly well. You can see those rates of return from those. But this was something I had control over. I could create streams of income. So I was sold on the idea. And so October of 2017, I went to Mark's boot camp and got into land flipping. And so I've been at it now for 7 years from when I first took the course and got into it. And it's been a wild ride. I've really learned a lot in how to run a business. It's really made me a better entrepreneur and learning how to outsource stuff better and train a team and it's allowed me and my family to go to some amazing places. This year, my daughter graduated high school, which, by the way, she's pre-med, got into everything. Nice. She wants to be a neurologist.
Very cool.
So, which I did not push her into that at all. Yeah. That was totally her. As a matter of fact, I was hoping she would work for me, which who knows, she might come back around, but because I know the hard work physicians put in, and I think she could create more wealth, honestly, with being a business owner. But anyhow, different subject for another day. I'm incredibly proud of her. She did what I couldn't do. She got into Northwestern and Cornell and some of the same exact places I applied. So
nice.
It was awesome. But anyhow, we've been to the Philippines. Last year we went to Switzerland, Germany. I've had New Zealand. I've had the fortune of traveling, working while I'm traveling.
Liberated.
And yeah, totally. Which it sounds really glamorous and it's amazing, but it's beautiful to see other places, but it's not necessary. I could be just as happy being at home and going up to the Boundary Waters here in Minnesota or other places and being able to work off my laptop there.
Yeah, absolutely. And this land flipping scenario, if you could walk us through a hypothetical example of this. And first of all, when you say a 100% return, you're basically doubling your money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So in land flipping, there's a bunch of different niches. All right. Yep. So what I'm about to describe is very simplistic, but it'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about. And this is how I started in the business.
Yep.
So what I was taught and still do today is I send out tons of letters to people that already own land. So we use various databases. DataTree is the one I have been using, although now there are quite a few different providers of data, and there's even people that will do pricing for you. But anyhow, we get data from DataTree. We make up offers based on what we want to make, basically. So if I want to make a 100% rate of return, if a property is worth $10,000, I might offer $3,000 or $4,000 or something like that, knowing that it may not actually sell for 10, right? I might have to sell it at 8,000 or 7,000 or something like that. And so we sent out all these offers. Literally, this month, I think we're sending out 15 to 20,000 offers, to give you an idea, to people in specific counties, specific subdivisions, specific acreage sizes in different states in the United States that I've done business in.
The fulfillment center that you're using so you're acquiring data and then you're probably using a fulfillment center to send these pieces of mail out. Is there some sort of automation in calculating the offer inside of that fulfillment center?
No. We manually create a bunch of spreadsheets. So I created a whole process around how I price land, which is much, much different than what I was originally taught. Mm-hmm. So initially, you would basically take some comps from like a lands.com or Zillow or something like that, and you would divide it by 4. And that would be the offer that you would send out on a price per acre process or whatever, over a whole county, over a whole state, over a subdivision. Like I said, there's a lot of ways you can slice and dice this stuff. But basically, the idea is a fraction of the people respond, like most any marketing. Yeah. So if I send out 1,000 letters,
talking like 1% to 4%. I mean, this type of response rate is really low.
Yeah, maybe I buy on cheaper properties, maybe 1 out of 600 or 700 letters, I actually buy a property. We do due diligence, we check into it. This is not like a house where we have to get an inspection done. Right. Depending on how well I know the area, we may hire a photographer to go check it out. We may get drone shots or something like that. We're looking on various tools we have, like MapRight and other things to look for floodplains and wetlands and
buildable, perkable, all of that stuff.
Perkable, we can't know for sure. You can get some indication, but at the end of the day, it's unless you get a perk test, it's kind of a roll of the dice. In Florida, you don't really have to worry about perking. In Colorado, you probably want a couple of acres, unless there's sewage lines or something like that, that run by the property. But most of the stuff we do is rural vacant land in the middle of nowhere, really. You're 2 to 4 hours away from a major metropolitan area.
Interesting.
And so then as soon as we acquire the properties, then the goal is to sell it. And we 99% of the time don't improve it. We just turn around and try and sell it at the market price, which is either for cash or owner financing, where they pay me as the bank a down payment, $500 or $1,000, and then a monthly payment. Usually, most of my notes don't go out past 8 years. There's a few exceptions. But that's the thing about the land business that's a con. Those notes don't last forever. We're constantly having to churn out letters and have deal volume in order to create long-term income, right? So those notes, sometimes they default, sometimes they're late, sometimes they pay off early. So it's a note portfolio that I've built up when I've done owner financing, which I've loved to do. But there's bookkeeping hassle in keeping track of all the notes. There's plenty of my friends that they won't do more than 50 notes because of all the management with it. But I've outsourced that to my staff as I built my staff out. So I might poke in here and there, but I'm not doing it on a daily basis like they are. So that's really the very simplistic description of it. At the end of the day, you're buying low, you're selling high.
Right. That's in that scenario, you're probably using your own cash. You have the opportunity to leverage cash in order to use that as well, too, whether lines of credit or other investors.
0% interest rate credit cards have been awesome. Yeah. Because I pay a 3 to 5% balance transfer fee. I'll pay down my line of credit with it, and then I have, $10,000 or $15,000 at a 5% interest rate or a 4% interest rate or a 3% interest rate, where I'm making, on a note, like 25%. Right. So, I'm making great arbitrage on using debt. Of course, there's risk with it, right? And initially I did not use debt. Certainly you can do a 401k loan is an awesome way to loan yourself money too. So you pay yourself back with interest, but I would never recommend someone use debt to start. You should get 10 to 20 deals under your belt. And in the land world today, there's a lot of land funders. There's even hard money lending that's coming into the space that literally is just happening in the last 6 months. There was no hard money lending before. So even beyond lines of credit and credit card, 0% rate credit cards, now hard money lending is coming into it. Tons of people have done equity splits on deals. So, 50-50 splits, 60-40 splits of profit, 70-30. So it started out at 50-50. It's creeping its way up, which is beneficial for me as an operator to work with people, because now I'm having to pay them less than I did years ago. Yeah. So it's an evolving industry, man.
So what happens when you have a note, and you say that they don't last as long? I mean, because you can't. I mean, you can put a mortgage on the property, right? So is your note tied to a mortgage?
No. Well, the mortgage is only through hard money lending. You don't get a mortgage on land unless you're doing a huge subdivide.
Right, but I'm saying when you sell it as the owner finance, yeah.
Yes.
So I could sell that. Say I'm selling the property for $10,000, but I secure my promissory note with a mortgage, which is recorded. Well, a deed of trust or a mortgage, depending on which state you're in. So that way you could do a 30-year AM on something like that and make that note last longer, right?
You could. Those would generally be bigger notes, but most of us
not $10,000.
Most of us don't want to be in the game that long.
Right.
When you do what you describe, you're usually doing like a $200,000 property.
Right. Okay.
Where now it's more like a house, in terms of how you think about it, that now you might finance it longer. You might have a balloon payment on it, for example. You could sell that note to other investors. If the buyer is on time, you've seasoned it for 3 to 9 months, you could turn around and sell the note for 80, 85, 90 cents on the dollar for what the principal is.
And you can even sell non-performing notes too for much less. And there's a whole angle on that as well too. What happens when you are owner finance? You're financing the property to the person who purchases it. They build a house on it, but then they go delinquent on your note. Do you get the house?
So that gets into really tricky territory. Ideally, we don't want someone to develop it.
Right.
When we're owner financing it. If it's a deed of trust, that gets to be a little easier. If you're doing a traditional land contract, this is getting some of the really specific weeds, so I hope it doesn't bore anyone. But basically, you have to be concerned with the Dodd-Frank Act once people start building on it and using it for a personal residence.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because as a land investor, when it's raw land, we are exempt from Dodd-Frank. When there's a structure of someone living on it, now you are subject to Dodd-Frank, which
interesting.
Which I'm not an expert on this, but this is what I understand in reading and talking to other people, that you really don't want that to happen. And so you got to be very, very careful about what you allow. Ideally, you want someone to pay it off. And then after they pay it off, do whatever you want at that point.
Right. Well, it makes sense. No, I mean, it's just that without diving deep into hypotheticals and all of this stuff, great opportunity. And you saw that and have benefited from it. You said you're 7 years into this, the land flipping aspect of it. And I know there are other types of land flipping out there, whether you're grabbing land, you're doing the developmental piece of it, you're getting it ready for a subdivision or whatever, and then you can then flip that to a builder who doesn't have that piece. It's just about the business that you built. And I want to commend you on yours, because you have built a business. And I talk about this book a lot, Cash Flow Quadrant, where Robert Kiyosaki talks about the differences of self-employed and investor and all of this stuff. And I hear you describing a business as a business owner, where it doesn't require you for it to operate. That's
the goal. I haven't achieved it, but I'm working towards it. So, I have dreams and visions of getting into self-storage, of getting into farmland specifically, because I think farmland's one of the best investments ever. People talk about passive income. It's such a misnomer. Residual income is a much more accurate, better word, as Robert Allen coined in Multiple Streams of Income. I think passive income is such a lie and a marketing tactic because it requires work. Farmland, well, if you have a tenant farmer, that legitimately could be passive. But my land business, flipping houses, managing rentals, that ain't passive. I'm sorry.
So there's nothing ever that's 100% passive. Right?
Nothing. I hesitate to use the word always or nothing, but it's very, very rare. Most of the
things. If you dig down into it, whether somebody's doing it for you or whatever, if you're the set it and forget it and not ever think about it thing, there's still like this millisecond of making sure that, hey, did I send that money out? Hey, did that money come back in? So therefore, theoretically, the idea of 100% passive is extremely difficult target to hit.
Totally.
If you set these paths and have these selections and focus consistent paths, there are ways to create these systems and operations and relationships that allow you to minimize even the most active scenarios. So if you take an active investment approach, but you build a business on that active investment approach, remember, a business is the target of building something that doesn't require your time as a business owner. So therefore, you're building a scenario that allows you to remove the active piece of it. It's this is all perspective, right, Dave? This is 100% perspective.
Which this gets me back to financial planning. The only true passive investment, in my opinion, is buying the S&P 500. You buy an index fund, an ETF that invests in the S&P 500. That will get done for you with you not having to lift a single finger. They will manage it. The index will change. It will be dynamic. And they're not going to be doing wild and crazy things with it. You could literally set it and forget it and never think about it for years down the road. That, my friend, is the most passive investment.
Right.
Which I think people forget about when we talk about real estate, which I'm into. I'm not against. I love it. I do it. But reality is financial planning is far, far, far more passive on the investing end if you want it to be that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll lay this in there right on the end. I've got maybe one more question for you, but on the end of it, nobody's going to care more about your money than you. So understanding, even on that set and forget, whether it's an ETF, index fund, whatever it may be, if you don't care about your money, it's more than likely that you could be missing opportunity and it could be sneaking away from you.
True.
Absolutely. What's something that you could go back, if you were able to go back 10 or 15 years and you saw young Dave and knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself 10 or 15 years ago?
Oh, man. 15 years ago, I just moved to Minnesota, literally. I would say to myself at that point, be very careful of the partners you make.
Ooh, interesting.
Because when I made that acquisition, there was all kinds, I didn't get into this at all in this podcast, but there was all kinds of stuff under the hood that I didn't realize until later. I would have told myself to look into land flipping earlier as well. Maybe it wasn't 15 years ago, but maybe 10 years ago. So if I had buy myself an extra couple of years, man, I would be crushing it even more now. Yeah, because there is more competition in land flipping than there was when I started in 2016, 2017. So if I had a couple years more head start, that would have been awesome.
Very cool.
But hey, we are where we are. I'm grateful for the lessons I've learned along the way, and all you can do is move forward. So,
Yep. Yeah, that's one with real estate. The best time to buy is 20 years ago and today. Right? Yeah. There's always this thing. If I could have, I would have, that kind of thing. Very, very cool. Love the story, man. The land flipping turn on financial advising, but also just reminding everybody, working with a financial advisor is great. It's not that it's bad, right? There's just directions. Make sure that you're building the right relationship with the right person. Just like you said there at the end, Dave, the thing, if you could just tell yourself to watch basically who you're partnering with. And that, I want to echo that on the same way for the listeners, even in the financial advisory world. Make sure you know who you're working with and that your values align, that your time align, your visions align, not for today, not for just next year or 5 years. Where are you going in the future? Because that's what it's about. Building that path forward and making sure that you're doing it with a team that's all on the same page. Mm-hmm. I thank you for your time. If anybody out there wants to hear more from Dave, whether it's land flipping or more opportunities, the podcast is great. drfreedompodcast.com. You can find that on there. Also, daviddenniston.com. You have your financial services there. A little more information on Dave as well, too. So check out the podcast, drfreedompodcast.com. Make sure you check in, leave him a review, and maybe even learn some more about land flipping, too, huh?
Yeah. We give updates on all that stuff. Another thing I've gotten into, which we didn't have time to get into today, is tax liens. Tax liens has been awesome. So I've loved getting into tax liens. So might have to talk about that a different time.
Yeah, maybe we'll have you back on and talk about tax liens. That sounds like a good show, man. Without getting into the weeds and boring everybody. I don't think it's boring. I think it's great. So hopefully the listeners do too. This is the Real Estate Mogul MD, and that's what we do. Dave, thank you for your time, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Brett. Appreciate you.
Awesome. And for everybody out there, thank you again for giving us a listen. Please, to the platform that you're on, Spotify or Apple, go ahead and leave us a review. You're welcome to email me at info@physicianwealthsystems.com. Let me know of a guest that you want to hear. If you want to be a guest, if you have any questions, if we can provide any resources or any information for you, shoot us an email. And until next time, thank you so much. We'll see you.